Okay, I think we'll get started now. Welcome everyone to the webinar today. We'll be going over new features in RoadEng version 9. My name is Lee Potker and I'm an account manager with Softree, and we also have Craig Spears here, software engineer, who will be presenting the new features. First item of housekeeping, we do have all the attendees muted, but we encourage you to ask questions by typing them into the GoToMeeting panel. They'll only be visible to us, and we'll go over them at the end of the webinar. And also a video recording of the webinar will be available on our YouTube channel, and we'll send you a link to that in a follow-up email. So we'll be showing the new features through an example road project. In the terrain module, we'll go over display shading, watershed calculation, and live maps, which is a new feature which allows you to quickly bring in georeferenced imagery from Google Maps or Bing. And in the location module, we'll go over the Project Explorer panel and corridor tab, plan view shading and display, improvements to the template editor, land XML export and MultiPlot updates, and lastly, the ability to use a reference feature to control other alignments. There are a bunch of other improvements included in version 9, which we won't go over today. One thing I'll just draw your attention to is we've added horizontal optimization to the Softree Optimal software. We won't be going over that today, but we will send out a video in the follow-up email that goes over the new adds to Softree Optimal. And now I'll pass it over to Craig.
Thanks, Lee. I hope everyone can hear me, and I'll just turn my screen on here. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. So I'm going to jump around a little bit. We advertised this seminar as being working through a project, but I'm going to do this in a very spotty way. I'm just going to jump around showing you features as they come. So first thing I'm going to look at is some enhancements that we've done to the terrain program. I've got here LiDAR survey. I believe it was done with a drone. And I want to show you first of all that we've made some improvements to the shading. So I'll just go into my plan options here and turn on shading, and this is the new feature. We've allowed the user to control the grid size of shading. Before we did shading for very large LiDAR data sets, it was quite slow. And now with this grid size control, we can shade things quite quickly. So I'm shading here. I'll just shade by elevation, and I've got these various ranges set up. Obviously you can modify those to suit. Other things that I could shade by, maybe slope or aspect, or what's called a light source rendering. Let's quickly do this. And there you can see very quickly I've got a shaded rendering of my LiDAR model. It's very quick. Another thing we've added fairly recently, and for those who've been following the beta, is the watershed calculations. We've put in a new set of operations. It's in here in TIN operations, and it lets you do things with from source, or I should say from target TIN surfaces. So I can drape features on a target surface, I can create boundaries, and this third one here, create watershed features, is quite new in the beta, and I'm just going to set the cell size for the calculation. It's a grid approximation and something called a fill depression depth. If you go into the help file on this, you'll see what that fill depression depth is all about. It's essentially taking some of the noise that's in the model out to calculate what a watershed would look like. I'm not going to go too far in that direction. Let's just go ahead and do it. It takes a second to create a regular grid, and do the watershed calculations. And there we have the polygons. I just unclick that and you can see the various watershed areas. I can also, of course, render this onto the 3D. It's a fairly big model, so be patient. I'll drape the plan image. Now some of this was in previous versions, but the watershed calculation itself is new. And of course, because they're polygonal features, you can select one, you can look at its area. Yeah, you can do calculations on it just as you could any other feature. Seems to be that this connection, something seems slower here, but see, there we go. So you can render that on top. The next thing I want to show you in terrain is what we call a live maps function. And yeah, what I do to engage that is, first of all, I have to have the file. This file has to be georeferenced, so you need to set up a projection, of course. Finding most people now are georeferencing their data. So I've got here a projection set up. And once that's set up and it's correct, I can go to the Home tab and then go into Import. I need to select some features first here. Let me just select these. It's going to complain that I've got too many points, but anyway, I go to the Import tab, click on that. And it's a little bit slow. Okay, maximum number of points 2,000 exceeded. Took a while to figure that out, but now it's going to go ahead and use the limits. And there's my my imagery, and I've got different sources that I can draw from. Bing, Google, they're usually reasonably good imagery. Of course, they're not as good as aerial imagery that you've had flown for your project, but the nice thing about it is it's free. So you can get imagery as well. You can get terrain data in some cases. I have to say the terrain data is pretty bad. It's the sort of elevation information you get from something like Google Earth. So it's not great, but again, it's free. So I can just grab it at the early stages of a project. So there's a function in here that allows me to crop an area. So I can just drag an area that I want to bring in, then go ahead and save it. In this case, I'm going to get 14 megabyte image, number of points, and so on. I just go ahead and save that. It takes a minute to process, download it, so it's going to be on your local machine. And then you, of course, can use this in your project work. I've already done this, so I won't bother, but well, let me go ahead and do it. I'll save it as image, save, increase the quality, apply transformation, gives me a warning that it's applying an average rotation. And there's my image. Now I've got it washed out. It's been added to the background. Just go into the background options here. Properties, and take out the washout. And there's my image of the area. Totally free. Didn't take me long to get this image. The areas that aren't covered, you can see. Not great quality, but it's there, it's free, and it's better than nothing. So let me now, by the way, there's a lot of other minor enhancements and small things that we've improved in the software, speed improvements. There's just too many of those to go through them in any level of detail, but there's a lot of them, version 9. I'm just going to switch over to the location design, and this is the same project. It's kind of funny, I got the word yesterday that I had to do this webinar and it needed drone data, and so I went looking for some drone data and I came across this. It was public information, it wasn't confidential, so I grabbed it thinking, this is a great project, I'll just quickly design a couple of roads. And what actually it turned out was it was pretty gnarly terrain, quite steep, and designing almost anything on this terrain was difficult. So I I did what I could in a very short period of time. Just to give you an idea what this looks like, we'll do the converse. We'll put our alignment into Google Earth just so we can have a look at it. Just remove some of these. I won't bother with sections. Just have a look at what we got. Yeah, everything I worked with was steep and it was tricky, and I wish I'd grabbed some flatter terrain to show you this version 9 features, but here it is. Here's my project area. So you can see the ground is super steep, and anything that I did, I ran into grade problems and anything. So that's how we got here. Anyway, let's go back and look at, I'm going to turn the imagery off in the background just to make things clear. So the first thing we did, and I think it's a big improvement, is to make multiple alignments more friendly. So you can work with different alignments, networks of road, junctions, intersections, what have you, in an easier way. Before, we've always been considered sort of a single alignment software, and we're definitely moving in the direction of multiple alignments. So this panel here is what we call Project Explorer panel, and it's live. So if I click on something, you'll see there's my access road coming off my main road. I've got a utility alignment along here. I've got a beach road which I created, and so on. So these are all separate alignments. When you select on them, they can have a profile, and they can have a cross-section. This particular road here, if I look at it, it's got an urban cross-section. If I switch back to the main alignment, it's got more of a rural highway cross-section. So you can apply cross-sections to these alignments. As well, you can have an alignment that has no cross-sectional information, and that alignment might just be used for reference. I'm going to elaborate on that a bit in a second. So the whole idea of the Project Explorer panel is to be able to navigate around in situations where you have multiple alignments, and there'll be more to come on that. So moving on, I want to show you a new feature here related to the plan window. It's a shading option we've got, and we'll go into plan options, turn on shading, and we can have a look at some of the different shading types. So the one that's very useful is just to simply shade, cut, and fill areas. And let's just go ahead and have a look at that. So there you can see that there's a width to each of these sections. And for instance, if we go here, you should see some cut, some fill. There you go. A little bit of fill in the center and then cut on the sides. Whereas out here, it's all cut. So this gives you a really good visual of where the cutting is going on, particularly if you're in steep ground like this. It's very useful. Some other options for shading. Well, let me actually switch alignments. Let me go back to this one I created, and there's the cut and fill on that alignment. Other shading options we've got are Let's go in here and we can shade a surface. So I've got two surfaces set up. Let me just back out of here for a sec. Show you what these are. In the cross section, I've got a surface here for a sidewalk, and it's called SRF6. And here in the main part of the road, I've got an asphalt surface, and it's SRF3. So what I did in the plan window is I shaded those areas. And so now I've got SRF6 shown in a green color and the asphalt is in gray. So I can shade different surfaces of my road in different colors. Quite useful. There are other options here as well. Just carry on. Shading. I can shade point codes, and here I've set up point codes. So I set up a from point code. In this one I've got ditch inside left as my code 1 and SSL as my code 2. So I can pick codes from the list, and what it's going to do is anything in the cross section between those two template codes is going to get shaded that color. So you can shade things like maybe an area of that needs to be seeded, or a shoulder, or whatever you want by simply entering pairs of codes. So in this case, I'm gonna show where the ditches are and the daylight on the ditches. The ditches are actually quite steep, but what we're showing here is that point there to that point there is shaded. You can see my cursor in the plan window. Quite flexible. There's lots of things you can do here. Carrying on, shading, one more. I've got general attribute functionality. I've got it set to show the grade of the road, but it could be anything, any one of your attributes that's available. Not sure how many of these make sense to show in plan view, but you can show areas and so on. Anyway, general attribute, I've got grade displayed, and I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And you can see the ranges of the grades. So this part of the road is steeper. And by the way, I offset this display away from the center line of the alignment. So if I switch to the main road again, Lakeside Drive, using that same shading pattern, I can see that this is pretty gentle in here, and this is steeper grades. Quite visual, might be good for presentations. Okay, next thing I wanted to show you, and this has come up a lot in the past, is exporting to total stations for stakeout, data collectors for stakeout. And formerly we could just export alignments, but now we have the functionality to export surfaces as well. So if I choose land XML, which is very standard way to get stuff to a data collector, land XML, I can now choose surface, and it will actually export the surface that I choose, and I have a choice here of different surfaces in my cross section or all surfaces. Other options here, I won't dwell on them, but this is really good for outputting surface information for stakeout. We've also made, throughout the software, we've made the functionality to work with current alignment or all alignments. So in this case, I'd be exporting surfaces for each of my alignments that had a surface associated with it. So there's quite a big step forward in functionality there. Moving on, template editor. We've done and continue to do work on improving our e-library. We're constantly adding components, and we've got lots of new components in from our e-library, just different different road situations for those of you who know about template components. So that capability has increased quite a bit and will continue. Moving on. So the next thing I want to show you is some improvements to the output or making it easier to create output sheets. So hope many of you are aware we have a MultiPlot capability. Let me just delete what I've got here and show you how I created it. I can't delete all the chapters, but there we go, book. Now, what I did was I went to MultiPlot. I went to what we call as our Access Web Library, and there we have different different chapters that are available for direct download. So that's, if I bring down the title block, I get this. Move this up, put that first. Access Web Library. I'll bring in a cross-section sheet. So there's a pre-built setup which you can use, and it knows about your page size. So you can very quickly get going on creating an output sheet using this library. Just bring in the plan profile as well. I think that's what I had to start with, and there are the different pages of my plan profile. So you get this, and I would imagine this library, like the e-library, will continue to improve as we work on it. So version 9 has this capability, and it will just get better. While I'm here on output sheets, I'll just quickly talk a little bit about Enza. So Enza is it's an application, runs on iPhones, runs on handheld devices, and I believe it's free or near free. And what you can do with location is you can save into a format that Enza will understand. Enza zip file. Check out Enza on the web. What I'll get if I had a handheld here is I'll get this chapter appearing in Enza with a GPS functionality. So the GPS is only going to work in the plan view, but I can track where I am in the plan view on my Enza. So if you're going out in the field, you want to just see where you are, quite a useful function. Okay, now I'm going to talk about, how are we doing for time? Oh, we're doing good. Something that's a little bit more complicated, and it's an offshoot from the multiple alignment panel that I described before, and that's functionality to reference other alignments from a given alignment, from the current alignment. So in this case here, I've got this main alignment. Let me just zoom to it. You can see it. Zoom to. So there's my alignment. It's kind of a gnarly, steep road. And in here, I've got another alignment, which I created. Let me just turn the imagery on quickly, show you what's going on. This is all pretty much fiction. I created a utility alignment that ran alongside the road, maybe a power line or something. And there it is there. I'll make it current. You can see it. And I'll look at its profile. It's sitting way up in the air. It's running alongside this alignment. So what I then did was I made this alignment a reference feature for this main alignment. So we'll go back to that main alignment. And I said, I referenced that feature, and I'll just turn on feature so I can see it. Reference features. Let's look in here, and I've said I set up this reference feature as a utility, my utility alignment, and I'm going to look at it as a projection in the main alignment, and I'm going to color it in with a blue dashed line just for my reference. And there it is. There's my utility line, and I'm looking at it in this alignment. Similarly, I go down here. I've created a little entranceway into a parking lot here, park access. That utility alignment crossed the park entrance, and I've set up I've set up that as a reference alignment, so I should see in here where that utility crosses. Maybe I have to do a recalculate. I can see it there in the profile. Oh, I know what I didn't do. I didn't turn it on. But there it is there in the profile. I can do the same in the plan view. Just let this, sorry, in the section view. Okay, section options, reference features. There it is. I'm going to display the intersection feature, and I'll put a big symbol on it so we can see it. Why am I not seeing it? Maybe I'm not going to see it in section. No. So it's not going to penetrate the section. Sorry, I'm not thinking too clearly here. We're going to see it in profile, and there it is. There it is as it cuts through the profile as a projected feature. But you get the idea. You have multiple alignments. You can look at other alignments from other alignments. It's quite flexible, quite powerful. The other thing you can do with multiple alignments is to use them to control templates. So I'll go back to this road that I designed here, access road. I very quickly designed it. I created entrance alignments, again, very quickly. There they are. And for this beach road alignment, I told it to tie, let's just look at the template for this. We'll go out here. And there's our urban section in there. Go into the templates, and you can see that I've actually tied this template, that the width of this template is tied to a reference feature. And in this case, the reference feature is our entrance reference feature that I've got up there. So yeah, quite a bit of flexibility in what you can do with reference alignments, and yeah, that's the multiple alignment functionality. There's lots of other things, as I mentioned, but I think I've covered the main features. Maybe it's a good time now, if you have any questions, to fire them my way.
Okay, thanks, Craig. So we do have a few questions here. So the first one is, so can we export now from location? Previously we had to do from the terrain module.
Export what? Was it export to another software, or?
Well, export now directly from the location module, where before they had to export from the terrain module.
You're talking about surfaces, I presume. Okay, let me discuss that a little bit. So save as, we have a lot of different types of, we can save DWG files, we can save, I mentioned earlier, XML files, and so on. If you are, my discussion about the XML is that now you can, if you, let's say you wanted to save this file to use it in some other software, maybe another civil package, you could use the XML export, and it will now pick up the surface information as well as the alignments. Most of these, this is fairly complete. One thing that hasn't been done is a direct export from here to a shapefile, and that will come, but right now it's a two-step process. You have to export to terrain first. Hope I answered that question. It's actually sort of an open-ended question, but
Yeah. I have another question. Can I profile a ditch alignment?
absolutely, yeah. Same concept that I did here with this utility alignment. That could have been a ditch, and then I could have tied the template in this main corridor, and I could have used that ditch as a reference alignment. Obviously, it would have to be quite a bit lower, but yeah. And then once the template's tied together, I'll be honest, there's a little bit of work to set it up, but once it's tied together, you can just switch alignments, change the profile of the ditch, and the other corridor will follow along. So short answer is yes.
Okay. Awesome. So if there's any questions we missed here, we'll get back to you guys by email. We're just a little over time here, so we're going to wrap up. So thank you everyone for attending. As I mentioned before, we have recorded this webinar, and we'll send you a link to that in our follow-up email, and we'll also include a link to a demo about Softtree Optimal, where you can optimize designs vertically as before and now also horizontally. So thanks for attending, everyone, and look for our follow-up email on this webinar.
Thanks all.